Thank you, Kathy. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange has seen a 29% increase in its earnings before tax. The biggest exchange on the continent has managed this despite a volatile operating environment. Newzroom Afrika spoke to the JSE CEO, Leila Fouri.
The JSE reported very strong results in the midst of a turbulent and very busy environment. Our revenues were up 10%. We contained our costs to below inflation, which was 3%, and that translated into our EBITDA of 20% and our bottom line or our headline earnings per share of 29%. Now that represents extreme activity and also particularly the JSE focusing on growth initiatives. We've increased our information services business by 15% in revenue, and our new acquisition, which is called JSE Investor Services, increased by 46%. So the JSE has, over the years, built a platform for growth, and we collaborate and interact with all of our market participants. And we work very hard to ensure that we are responsive in innovating and really delivering and building on that platform for growth.
We've seen this phenomenon happen globally, that even in times of real economic crisis, the capital markets, so the exchanges such as yours, do very, very well. Why is it that you can capitalize from this volatility so much?
The JSE is really all about enabling trade. So we ensure that transparent pricing can be formed in a time of crisis, and that we can enable investors and those companies who are wanting to buy and sell shares to trade on an immediate basis during a crisis. We are no stranger to volatility. South Africa is an emerging market. We experience volatility on a regular basis, and now we're part of a globally volatile environment. What is important is that the JSE offers a resilient platform. We've invested over the years in our technology, and it's important that we make sure that our systems always make available the ability for companies to raise capital and the ability for traders to invest in those companies. And that's been demonstrated not only throughout the pandemic, but particularly over the last 6 months at the JSE.
Most recently, the BBBE Commission released its annual report on transformation, and they have a very interesting stat in that report that overall black ownership is somewhat stagnant and even a little bit on the decline. And it had me wondering whether the JSE have their own transformational agenda points and where you think you're faring in that regard.
The JSE places a really high priority on transformation, and we have grown and developed our transformation statistics. Our board is very well transformed, with more than 60% of our board members, both female and then people of color. At an executive level and throughout the organization, we continue to prioritize transformation, and we do use our platform, our convening platform, to encourage transformation. You would know that we are about to launch our She Invests conference in a week from now, which focuses on females, and we support our black brokers by providing for them reduced pricing to try and encourage business and to enable growth. So on all levels of our organization, we are focused on transformation. It's a very important aspect. And we're also focused on creating an inclusive environment. So the SME market is a very crucial growth node, and our retail market is receiving a lot of attention from the JSE.
I hear you from the actual JSE as a company, from that perspective, that you have your own transformational goals, etc. But I wonder, do you have any influence on the actual exchange and how companies that are listed, any sort of requirements or transformational necessities for them as well that you try and enforce, or at least maintain the goal, the overall objective of transforming the exchange as a whole?
Kopano, the JSE is very much on the forefront of governance and disclosure. You would have seen many years ago, we were the first country to introduce a disclosure requirement that boards disclose the composition of their boards. More recently, we're very pleased that we launched what we call sustainability disclosure requirement, and in that we have focused on the social dynamics. Boards and companies, listed companies, are required to issue a report which indicates both their objectives and how they're doing in transformation. So we're very much in sync with what's happening at the BEE Commission, and we do all that we can to collaborate and to support our market participants, particularly in the governance and disclosure space.
Going back to what you said about how you've worked on supporting SMEs especially, and how that's translating in the exchange, when we think of the small cap sector as well, that's taken quite a beating in the last year, and they've struggled a little bit on the exchange, not just with keeping up with regulatory requirements, but really seeing the value in staying listed on the exchange. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what you're doing for those smaller entities that want to really find value or release value from the exchange, but are having a bit of a difficult time in the last 2 years especially?
Sure, certainly. And Kopano, we are very alive to the very difficult position that many smaller organizations find themselves in as a result of both the pandemic and the macroeconomic headwinds that we all are facing into. The JSE is focused in on a number of areas. Firstly, we launched our private placements market, which really allows small companies to apply for funding. We've had 11 companies who have registered as applicants on our platform. We've had 10 billion rand in investor funds committed on that platform. Some of the projects that have been listed for or issued for capital are hospitals, a school which is looking to grow, to develop a couple more schools, a renewables company, and there are a number of companies in the renewables space in the pipeline. In addition to that, we also run an SME accelerator program. This provides bespoke coaching and support for growing SMEs. Now, these are typically SMEs that are established and that are scaling up. And in addition to that, we are working with market participants to launch an incubator environment, which is new companies, startups, who are working in their family garages to make a living and to make a contribution to the economy. We think that the future of this country and the growth mode of the country is in the small and medium space, and we're doing all we can to support that growth and to enable access to fundraising and to capital.
Lastly, Leila, and you raise a very interesting point when you say that you have a different kind of responsibility for supporting SMEs. And I wonder, do you think that the way that an exchange in South Africa operates has to be a little bit different because of our macroeconomic climate? Although we are well established and developed and industrialized, the nature and structure of our economy may require a South African exchange to operate very differently to how a European or an American exchange might work. And do you think you have a different role to play in South African society in that sense?
Absolutely, Kopano. In fact, we often use the word we have our social license to operate. That means that we're not only focused on the financials, but the social dynamics and the context in which we find ourselves is fundamentally different. And so while we always respect and adopt international standards, what we always need to do is ensure that we have a social lens. We're the most unequal country in the world. We're facing into very high unemployment, and we have a social responsibility at the exchange to do everything that we can. We run a schools challenge, which is has been around for many decades and highly successfully trains and educates more than 20,000 students every year in a trading game so that they understand how financial markets work. Our CSI approach and our work in the community is a very important priority, and building out an inclusive environment, focusing in on retail investors, on financial literacy is a very, very important part of everything that we're all about.
That was Leila Fouri, the CEO of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the largest exchange on the African continent.